Okay, so on this one, let me write it right here. A equals a half BH. Okay, and so we need to solve this thing. So what are we going to do first? Well, right off the bat, you notice, I'm sure you noticed that we have fractions with an equal sign, right? Fractions with an equal sign. So what do we do, right? Because here we have fraction, here we have an equal sign. So what do we always do every time we have fractions with an equal sign? Our first step is to get rid of those fractions. We hate fractions pretty much, right? Because they're a pain. We just like to get them out of there on the first step. How do we do it? We multiply all the terms by the LCD over 1. Right? LCD over 1. And the LCD equals the denoms multiplied. Okay, well, the only denominator we have is a 2. It's the only thing under a bar. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to multiply by 2 over 1 here and 2 there. You can put this 2 over 1 if you want, but it's no, you don't need to. It's not a fraction. Now you might wonder, a good question, you might be saying, Mr. Aaron, shouldn't we do the B and the H also? No, they're all one term. So now's a good time for me to define and talk about what terms are. When we say all terms, let me give a little information here. Terms are separated from each other. I never know how to spell separate. That's supposed to be an A there. Anyway, whatever. Terms are separated by adding, subtracting, plus and minus. Meaning, if you had a half plus B minus H or whatever, yeah, then they'd all have to get a 2 over 1, 2 over 1, 2 over 1. In that case, you would have 3 separate terms, and they would all have to get a 2 over 1. But if they're right next to each other, which means they're times really, they're all just one term. They're not separated. Is that making sense? That's going to be an important thing as we go forward in this class, is to understand that terms, this is really super important definition. Terms are things separated by adding and subtracting. So what my point is this is all one term right here. This right here is one term because there's no separation. There's no adding or subtracting between them. If there was, then they would be 3 separate terms, and then they would all get a 2 over 1. So that's why we only do a single 2 over 1 to the right side, because they're one big chunk, one big term. All right, and then step 2. Cross cancel. Multiply the leftovers. Cross cancel. And what do we get? 2a is little b, little h.
We don't need the 1 in front of the b because it's just assumed that there's a 1 in front of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. If I go 1 times 7, is that any different than just writing 7?
No.
Okay. Make sense? That's why I don't show the 1, because yeah, sure, it's there if you want, but what is it doing? Nothing. 1 is the only lonely number. No, I'm sorry. I mean, you do the Beatles song, but yeah, good question, Brittany. It's just, yeah, 1s don't do anything. 1 times 7 is just 7. 1 times BH is just BH. Right. So you're right. It's really there, but we just don't even bother with it because it's doing nothing. All right. Now, that's the first step. Now's where we got to keep our eye on the ball, meaning what are we trying to solve for? What do they want us to get alone? So it's right here, H. They could have picked any letter, A, B, H, whatever. So let me circle it. There's the H. And we're thinking, okay, we need to get that H alone, put in the wall separation here. So we're saying, okay, we got to get that H alone. H is over there yelling out, I want to be alone. Put down here. So H said, I want to be alone, right? That's what we're trying to solve. See, I have H equals over here, right? That's what we're trying to get alone. So H said, I want to be alone. So we got to get rid of that B, don't we? Well, how do you get rid of that B? Should I subtract B? No. No, that B is right next to H with no adding, subtracting in between, so it's multiplied. So the way to get rid of it is divide, huh? And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. And we just do one B here. Why? Well, why don't we do a B for each of these? Because they're one term. Remember the terms thing? Terms are separate. Now, if this was 2 plus A, then I would divide them both by B. Does that make sense? Because then there would be two separate terms. So remember, really important, terms are separated by adding, subtracting. So if there's no adding, subtracting, there's no separation. So that means right here, this is one term. 2 and A are together. They're one term. So you just divide by 1B on both sides is the point. The B's cancel here. H is alone. What is it? 2A over B. 2A over B. 2A over B. And there we go. So again, recapping, what do we do? When you've got fractions with an equal sign, you multiply by LCD over 1. 2 over 1 and just 2 here because that's not a fraction. This is all one term. There's no pluses or minuses separating anything. The 2's cancel, BH, and then they said, please get H alone. We said, okay, we'll get H alone. Divide by B on both sides, just a single B, because again, there's no separation here. It's one term. 2A over B. There we go.